Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. Today we're going to be looking over an article from Aubrey Gordon. She writes, "What I learned as an 11-year-old in Weight Watchers." So I want to go ahead and go through this just because I'm sure it will be the most nuanced of takes. It'll be the most generous of interpretations and the most physically grounded and sane thing we will ever read. So let's go ahead and get started. At age 11, I learned to fear food and think of my body as a failure. Yeah, when I went to Weight Watchers, that was what they told us. Okay. When I first read about Kurbo by WW, the new weight loss app designed for teens and children as young as 8, I was suddenly 11 years old again, sitting on the steps of a community center basement, summoned by the failure of my too fat body. I was somehow both too much and too little. Growing up as a fat kid meant hearing judgment, derision, and outright revulsion of fat bodies at every turn, from family, friends, doctors, media, teachers. And at the center of it all were bodies like mine, the bodies of fat kids. I was a 6th grader, bare in a spotlight, defined by her insufficiency. So I was sent to Weight Watchers. Okay. I will say that there was a lot of, I don't know when she was in 6th grade, but when I was, there's definitely a lot of conversations around obesity being a negative thing. I don't remember if I took it all that personally, because for me, I was never under the delusion that obesity was healthy. I never ever thought that, because I could see like all the health effects for my grandma, for my mom, and then there were certain health effects that I could feel in myself from a very young age, from a relatively young age, maybe not 6th grade, but, definitely as I got older. So I was never really, I didn't have to have an institution tell me, because I saw it in my family. I saw my future. And so I guess I don't relate to caring about like what all of society thought like all the time, because it was brought up a lot. I didn't feel good about it, but it was just kind of like how it was. And I think like I get frustrated sometimes when writers like Aubrey Gordon, they write a lot to like a Gen Z audience, or they write a lot to like a young audience, where it's like a young audience isn't going to understand that things aren't necessarily as triggering or as big of a deal if that's just how it is, if that's just what you're living in. There is a very strange paradox within fat acceptance that fat phobia is the water we live in, the water we swim in, the air we breathe, etc. But also fat phobia is extremely shocking and terrifying and traumatizing if it occurs. And you kind of have to pick one. So I will say is weight was a huge topic of conversation when I was a kid, but it was such a huge topic that it was like, you just kind of get used to it, It's something that it's not shocking to hear, pretty much. So I don't know if I would consider that traumatic. And again, like I had some actual traumatic events in my childhood that I don't want to get into in this video, but perhaps having been through certain things, something like people talking about obesity being unhealthy, it didn't even register on a scale of 1 to 10 as a child. It just didn't. Not in comparison. What I do remember was feeling insecure or feeling like jealous of people being thin when I was a kid. So like if I was 11, That's something that I felt. And I just thought a lot of like, why me? Why does this have to be my struggle? Why do I have to be fat? Why do I have to deal with this? Because it was a lot. Like, even at that age, it reduced some athleticism and stuff. I'm not trying to say I would have been super athletic, but it definitely didn't help. And it just kind of made things more awkward in general because I don't know. It was just weird. That's all I can say. I think when I was around that age, I was more concerned probably with like my gender expression, I had a later puberty, certain things like that. Like, that's more so what I was concerned about. Like, the weight was definitely there too, but it wasn't like, I don't think it was my number one if I had to think about it. In terms of like fearing other people's judgment or whatever, I think I would fear a lot of other things more at the time, which, again, like, it's interesting because Aubrey herself is gay, so I don't know if that was not an issue for her growing up or if she didn't even care at all. That would have been interesting because the way she talks about obesity and fatness, it's like she never had anything else. It's like that's the only thing she ever struggled with. That's how she acts. And I think she puts it up on such a pedestal that it's like nothing else could affect you as much as doctors saying being fat is unhealthy or something like that. And to me, thinking back to that time, it was just like, no, like there were so many things and people just were more freely critical back then. I don't know how to describe it to people who are younger, but people just didn't feel the need to hide their every criticism. And I think that's how society usually was. It's really just been the past 8 years or so that's not the case. Maybe like, I guess since like around 2014, 2015. But prior to that time, I think for all of time, people just said things. There was maybe some elements of political correctness or something, but it just wasn't the same. It just wasn't. And then, I don't know. I think it has to do with social media or something. But even within the social media age, you still get people's comments. It's just they just write it anonymously. So it's like you still get it. So I don't think it ever changed. But I think in people like Aubrey's mind, they think they had control over people for a second, but they never did. I think it was just that the internet gave people an outlet, so they did it less in person. And even now, I feel like that's changing and people are just saying things again. So it's just, I think it was just a moment in time. It's similar to fat acceptance in general. It kind of had like a pop off moment with like social media algorithms, but that's all falling apart at this time. So let's continue. Those are just some of my thoughts on what she's written so far. In those meetings, I heard adult women, one over after the next, describe their fear of food and their fear that they weren't afraid enough. I heard them talk about the ways they saw their bodies as barriers to the things they wanted most: love, desire, success, money, happiness. I learned to blame my body for every failure. I learned to long for thinness as a pathway to another life, the technicolor world of happiness and success that those women described so longingly, which was just out of reach. I learned to chastise myself like they did. I learned to fear food, over time coming to resent needing to eat at all. This, I will say, this is a pretty on point. This is actually pretty well stated. I don't know, again, when Aubrey was a kid, but this to me is very much how obesity was thought about, like in the 2000s. That's when I think of that, I think of like this, like thinness as a path to another life. You describe it so longingly. It's like very, very emotional. And I think a lot of the stuff that was done back then, it obviously wasn't effective, because look at where it ended, right? Everything just got so much worse. This part I think is a little bit dramatic. Fearing food, they didn't really teach that. It's kind of ridiculous. This is just an ED. So that's just an ED logic, ED mindset. That sounds very BED to feel that way. So again, Aubrey kind of betrays herself a lot without realizing it. But yeah, I'm not a fan of this logic because it's extremely subjective. And it's like love, desire, success, money, happiness. Like these things they're more abstract. And I don't like when we talk about bodies or weight with these abstractions, because we should try to keep it as objective and as concrete as possible. And trust me, I say that from experience. I am the queen of abstraction. And I have learned that when it comes to this issue, concrete thinking, logical reasoning, and really objective, grounded observation is extremely important within weight issues. This is just ridiculous. And I think a lot of these women probably struggled with ED mindsets and maybe even just BED in general, because this is all very like everything with BED, you go back to your body. Your body is the cause of everything. Your body is why you don't have anything. Your body is this, your body is that. And it's always very much, it's rooted in body image. You have to remember, it's not about health. BED, when they talk about it, the only time somebody with BED talks about health is when they get into that, like, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die spiral, which I don't think that goes on. That's not necessarily all the time. You know, that's more like when you hit like a crisis or when you have a moment where something happens, kind of like when Amberlynn Reed got cancer, basically. I'm just using it as an example. I'm not, criticizing or anything. It's just an example. But otherwise, health is usually not discussed unless if it has to be, if that makes sense. It's almost like you hardly ever even think about it. So it's always like, oh, I can't find a relationship because I'm fat, or people don't like me because I'm fat, or I can't, like this, love, desire, success, money, happiness. These are feelings. Feelings come and go. Money is not as much of a feeling, but money can come and go as well. So it's not logical to tie your body to that. So I wish that Weight Watchers would have said something about it, but they obviously probably wouldn't. Okay. Anyways, all of that stands in stark contrast to my life in adulthood. Does it, Aubrey, or are you basically the same? Today, at 35 years old, I am so proud of who I have become, the professional and academic successes I've garnered, the family I cherish, the relationships I've built, the ways in which I failed, and the ways in which I've grown. Most days, I carry that pride and full heart with me, an awareness of the charmed and ever-evolving life I am privileged to lead. I've come a long way from the child that spent so many weeknights in Weight Watchers meetings. WW, then known as Weight Watchers, was not my first diet, nor would it be my last. Ooh, we're getting into the villain creation story. You guys ready? Growing up as a fat kid meant memorizing the rules of one diet after another. Low fat, low carb, low calorie. This is giving BED, by the way. Aubrey, I don't know if you're aware of that, but there's a restrictive side. Okay. You're always having to learn new rules because you're always changing it. And why are you always changing it? Because you're choosing something unreasonable, something illogical. You're usually trying to lose it as fast as possible. Sound familiar? Weight Watchers was just one stop on my odyssey through the diet industry, through her BED, along with other notable stops like the diet pill stop and the meal replacement stop. Unreasonable. I would go on to spend another 15 years desperately chasing weight loss that never came. Like some cruel absurdist punchline, a preteen waiting for Godot. Oh my gosh, that was gay. But I learned so much from my time there. After all, I was the youngest in a room full of women who also seemed to understand and repeat the message that their lives wouldn't be complete until they weighed less. ED mindset. That is an ED mindset. So I talk a lot about idealized versions of your body. Sometimes, or at least I used to when I very, very first started doing this. When I started this fat advocacy, whatever, anti-FA activism, whatever you want to call it. So one of the first things I said, which I did get a little bit of pushback at the time, is I said that visualizations, manifestations, these kinds of ideas are very, very unhelpful to somebody that is really big. I think it could work for somebody that has to lose like 15 pounds or something. Like maybe you're just kind of chunky and you want to have abs. It might work. But if you're like 200 pounds overweight, you don't know how your body's going to look. You don't understand how your body's going to look. You may not have even been thin ever in your life. You may have nothing to even visualize. And so you may envision a body that never comes. And if that happens, then it could trigger. It could be an ED trigger. So I don't ever suggest going there. I always tell you guys, we need to stay real. Don't think of an ideal self. Just think of yourself changing. Does that make sense? Think of yourself improving. So it's kind of like you look at it from little steps and okay, this is getting better. Like, and really, really focus. I really advocate to focus more on the health stuff because especially when you're really big, you probably have health issues. And I would just say that, especially in the case of preventable health issues, or health issues that are benefited by weight loss, I wouldn't say that your life isn't complete. I would just say that your life will expand further. And it changes the mindset from something missing to something gained. And I think that those ideas are really important. It's really important to shift certain things because this is coming at it from a what is missing mindset, and it's just very negative. And weight loss is negative enough, honestly. It kind of is. It's tough. So just shift the mindset a little bit because you could see like Aubrey had all these bad ideas in her mind and she never got over it. It never helped. Because there's these it's like you put too much into the weight loss. It's like, think about it just in terms of the health benefit because everything else isn't guaranteed. My friend Eric, he was telling me a story about somebody talking to him about like basically like one of his fat friends or something. And the friend was telling him that a lot of people like Eric because Eric is in shape, or that Eric can date more people because he's in shape, and just like all these different things, right? That person does have VEG. And Eric was just like, you'd have to change a lot more than your body size basically. It's like the person is not charming at all. The person does not have any charisma. The person does not, doesn't know how to talk to people, doesn't know how to do all these different things. Like the person doesn't have a job, like you could go down the list. The person has all these other issues. And so I think where I will agree with FA, which, gosh, there are so many few points that I agree with them. But where I will agree is that weight is not everything. And I've understood that more probably this past year than ever, because I lost weight and all these practical issues came to the forefront, and all these things that I was too sick to do in the years prior, I had to catch up on. And it was very overwhelming and really horrible. And now it's like my life is just so much less predictable. I don't know where things are going. I don't know what's going to happen because I never got this far. And so I have to just see, but I think, catching up. I don't even know. But it's like the weight is not everything. You can't put the weight on an altar and worship it. You can't do that. It doesn't work. You make it unattainable in your mind. You make it, and you put it on a pedestal. It's like you put it above you, away from you. You put it somewhere that is impossible for you to get to, and it isn't. It's not above you. It's right across from you. It's not anything. And I think the more we embrace weight loss as a boring, mundane, pedestrian activity as a culture, the more successful we will be. Because if you look at this Weight Watchers mindset of all this stuff, thinness as a pathway to another life, a technicolor world of happiness and success, that was just out of reach. If you look at all the emotion put into it, weight loss is already emotional enough because of the hormonal fluctuation. And I always advocate to think about it in terms of hormones, because we need to de-emotionalize weight loss as much as we can. It doesn't mean that there won't ever be actual emotional moments within weight loss, but it does mean that we need to get to a place as a society where we don't expect a Biggest Loser episode with a crying moment every day. Because it shouldn't be that way. It should be boring. Because boring is real. And real is success. Real success. Real success is beneficial health outcomes. And that's what we're here for. Okay? Okay. But I learned so much from my time there. After all, I was the youngest in a room full of women who also seemed to understand and repeat the message that their lives wouldn't be complete until they weighed less. At 11 years old, week after week, I sat in a room with older women, and from them I learned the contours of my failures and the failures of anyone with a body that's too big. Despite the stark difference in our ages, experiences, needs, and wants, these adult women were to be my peers, even as I was in the 6th grade. I worried about how to handle snacks at a sleepover. They worried about reigniting their dwindling sex lives with distant husbands. Oh, gosh. Their words became the scripts of self-loathing that I would faithfully recite for years to come. My future and my fortune, I learned, would forever be determined by my size. I think that, I don't know if this is where Aubrey developed a lack of empathy or a lack of an ability to differentiate herself from other people, but she clearly didn't grow out of it. She must have the mind of an 11-year-old. There are certain things that I can look back on as an 11-year-old and think, that really wasn't about me. That really wasn't my fault, my problem. Maybe I thought that was my fault, but it wasn't, right? Like, we can look at these things as adults and look back and reflect and think, oh gosh, I thought that, but it wasn't the case. Like, maybe there's somebody where their parents got a divorce when they were a kid and they felt like it was their fault. I feel like you should be able to look back as an adult and see that it wasn't your fault. And that's not what this is giving. Somebody else's marriage. I mean, I think it's kind of scarring to talk about this with kids around. I don't think a lot of these women had boundaries or they understood like what Weight Watchers was. Like, it's kind of cringy to even do that. I wouldn't suggest it. Like, I think you need to probably just go to a therapist or something, or like a sex therapist, to somebody to talk about that in a more private way. Like, that is really cringy to do, because Weight Watchers is like, it's very public. Like, I don't care what they say. Like, like I went to Weight Watchers and you would catch me dead before you'd catch me sharing something like that at one of those meetings. Like, I just think that that's inappropriate, but whatever. That's my opinion. I learned as a child in Weight Watchers that the joy of eating was reserved for those who were forever thin. This is not true. This is such a lie. Okay, this is ridiculous. Her saying this makes me think that this didn't happen. Because I cannot imagine somebody talking about their sex life at a Weight Watchers meeting. Like, let me know if you guys have ever been to one where that happened. It's just such like a public setting, and it's already embarrassing as hell. Because like, it is embarrassing to weigh yourself publicly. It's horrifying. I mean, I do it. I share my weight, but I don't share it every week or every day. You know, it fluctuates a lot. And I just show you guys the trajectory over time. You know what I'm saying? But it's like, it was awful to weigh in. I hated it. It was horrible. Ugh. Anyways, that I hated. I did, because it's embarrassing. Okay. I learned as a child in Weight Watchers that the joy of eating was reserved for those who were forever thin. The rest of us, I learned, needed to spend our lives weighing and cataloging our food intake, pushing our bodies past exhaustion to earn points with higher to earn food with higher points values. It's just exercising. You don't have to push yourself past exhaustion, Aubrey. Like, you're so dramatic. This is ED. ED mindset. There it is again. Spend our lives. I would say at least monitoring. But the biggest thing is just not eating when you're full. Which is not that hard if you don't have BED. Because you feel sick when you eat a lot. It makes you feel sick. So if you keep going beyond that point, it's actually painful. So it's actually a lie when people with BED say, oh, well, I just enjoy the pleasure of food. You don't, because it's not pleasurable when you go past the point. If it was just about the pleasure, then you would stop when you were full. That's a lie. It's a self-lie, because it hurts. It's gross, and you have to like, I had to break something in my brain before I would not feel nauseous and stuff anymore. And now I would feel nauseous if I were to binge again. I would. I feel very nauseous, so I won't. You know? Anyways, okay. I learned to expect the public humiliation of being weighed and assessed each week. Yeah, that's horrifying. That part I agree with. I hated it. My weight cataloged in a ledger by our group's leader. In time, that shame lived within me long after I stopped attending meetings. I know, but you can't blame everything. This is you. This is your ED, Aubrey. You know, I don't think about when I weighed in at Weight Watchers. I don't think about that. I just think, oh my God, that was so embarrassing. Ew. But once again, it's in a long list of embarrassing experiences I've had in my life. So it doesn't particularly stand out any more than any other. I learned how many calories were in a half cup of blueberries, a slice of cheese, a piece of toast. I learned how to keep a food journal, a skill that I kept as an eating disorder flourished in me later in life. It was already there, Aubrey. I learned that eating a piece of cake at a friend's birthday party was something I couldn't do freely or joyfully as thinner people could. You don't know what thinner people do, for one. Again, this is another one of the paradoxes of FA is that thin people can do whatever they want, but also they act like every thin person has a restricted ED. It's like you have to choose one. So what narrative are we going with today, Aubrey? It's ridiculous. Did you notice how much the thinner people were eating, how much cake they ate? Because I can assure you it was probably less than what you wanted to. Anyways, instead I had to log it, account for it, explain it. Yes, when you're losing weight, you typically have to log your food, especially from a very big size. It's just a matter of monitoring, and it should be as unemotional, mundane, and boring as possible. Remember it for weeks to come for the points that I added to my weekly quota. And I learned from the older women in the meeting that the appropriate response to such an indiscretion was to publicly bemoan my failure of willpower, strength, character, and the penitence they so firmly believe was required to become thin. Well, yeah, I just think that kind of, these kind of things don't work. It's brought up a lot, but it doesn't work. If you have an ED, it's not about willpower. It's about anxiety. That's primarily what it's about. It's about coping. And it's about fixations. So it's more so about let's not think about our body for 2 hours today. Let's not get into a mindset where we start thinking about what super restrictive diet do I want to try. Let's not think about how much we want to eat. Those mindsets, those obsessions are what it is. So it's not about willpower. It's about obsession and anxiety. That's what it's about. So you want to stop the obsession or become obsessed with something else. That doesn't matter. I recently have become obsessed with the Saw movies. The plot in those movies are so insane that it's keeping my mind busy to try to figure out all the timeline of events. And luckily, my bestie Eric loves Saw as well, so we literally talked about the plot line of Amanda for like an hour last night as I had just watched Saw 3. But the point is, shift the obsessions towards harmless things and channel the anxiety into something else, like knitting, or my mom started doing these like bejeweled or like jewel painting things. Channel the anxiety into something else. Go to the gym. It's normal to be active. If you're not active, you're going to be more anxious. Think about all the ways you could reduce your anxiety. Get control over your finances. Don't be in abusive relationships. Don't stay in an abusive job. Try to find a way out. Right? These are all huge steps that would help somebody because it's not just about willpower. Okay? It's a holistic thing. And when anxiety comes, how do we cope with it? What mindsets do we continue? What mindsets do we no longer allow ourselves to go down? That's what we have to think about. Okay. As I told you guys recently, I've been struggling in a sense because I've missed certain things. I've missed having it. And one of the things I noticed today is in my mind, I started thinking about different restrictive diets I could try because my weight loss has stalled and I have really been hungry a lot lately. And I felt the thought come in and I was like, ooh, no. And so I just said no. And I reminded myself that I'm not in a competition, that it could just be a moment in time. It could be a phase. I had been in a what's it called? I had been in a deficit for 6 months. My body might just be hungry because of that. Or maybe I need to shift things around, my macros. I'm experimenting a little bit with some higher fat days, some higher protein days. But I'm just trying to figure it out. But I'm not going to entertain those thoughts. You know? So you have to just certain things, you just don't go down the path because it doesn't lead anywhere good. It never does. And I do find myself resisting it a lot lately. But every time it comes up, I just say no. Just like, nope. And I just want you guys to understand that it never works. So don't do it. Okay? It never works. Oh, gosh. I think the hardest part about not having it anymore, as I've said multiple times, is just the unpredictability and the uncontrollability of my life. It freaks me out because I miss that ritual just so I can know what's coming. And I realized that might be even more of the reason why, more than anything. Because I miss knowing what's coming. I miss knowing the diet is coming, and then knowing the undoing it is coming, and then knowing the freak out about my body is coming. I miss knowing all these things, and I don't know things anymore. Life is less predictable, and that could be magical, but it can be nerve-wracking too, but I'm going to stay in the unknown, And that's what it is. You just don't go down these paths. You don't go down these paths in your life. You just keep going, Anyways, okay. Okay. Just barely out of grad school, I had already learned the fundamentals of diet culture and ED alike. But more than that, I learned that all my actions, accomplishments, and failures would forever be broken, their light refracted through the prism of my body. That's ED logic. The personal stories of group members and our group leader alike made it clear that their happiness, relationships, and very sense of self hinged on their ability to become thin. That is ED logic. These are not health. Are these health? Happiness? Relationships? What if you lose somebody as you lose weight? That could happen. Happiness? What if you're sad as you lose weight? That probably will happen. Sense of self? That's ED. You should not identify with your weight. It doesn't make sense. As a child in a room full of adults, these weren't just individual stories. They were object lessons, frightening, foreshadowing of my future life if I stayed fat. Any future relationship that failed would be squarely my own fault, a natural result of living in a body that was categorically undesirable. Has nothing to do with your behavior, Aubrey. Has nothing to do with being controlling, narcissistic, unable to differentiate yourself from other people, unable to take accountability for anything. I mean, you have to, those types of traits are not attractive to anybody, no matter what. It's just one part of your life, you guys. It's all it is. There's all these other parts of your life that you have to work on. And when you make your whole life about this, it's not healthy. Because, again, you shouldn't put it on an altar and worship it. It's just losing weight is boring at the end of the day. Oh, man. Social failures, too, would be understood as a direct result of the size of my body. Wrong. Every aspect of my life, character, and relationships would be measured against the yardstick of my soft and growing body. No. What is measured is your health issues, the health problems to come that do make things worse. And it's preventable. It doesn't have to happen. You shouldn't wish that on yourself. You shouldn't be careless. You shouldn't throw it away. You know, the fact that not everybody has their health, it should make you appreciate that you have it and try to take care of it. Because people who are unhealthy, and I've been very unhealthy before, when I would see people just piss away their health, it disgusted me. It did. As I read about Kerbo, I was reminded of what it felt like not just to be in that room, but to be a child navigating these complicated lessons of eating in bodies for the first time. In adulthood, it's easy to forget the rigor of childhood. There's so much work in charting our past through the wilderness of a world that remains new to us. 8-year-olds, the beginning of Kerbo's target demographic, are left to make sense of the world around them, circumlocating every interaction, mining them for meaning. As children, they are already detectives of social interactions. Where do they fit in this world? What matters about who they are? Who has power, and how can they claim some influence of their own? And at precisely that moment, childhood weight loss programs reinforce in children what I learned so long ago, that their place in the world will be determined by the shape of their skin. I think that is just so much projection and ED logic in one single paragraph that it's like not, it's kind of like a jarbled mess of nothing. It's like, that's just Aubrey's experience. Not every child will experience it in the same way. You know, people forget that BED is caused by trauma. It's a trauma response. Something has to happen. Either something very severe and shocking, or something that is maybe less severe but lasted a long time. But something has to happen. You don't just wake up one day and you have an ED. It doesn't work like that. Okay, because something has to shock your system so much that you have that anxiety to begin with. And it doesn't just happen. It's disingenuous, Aubrey. Of course, Kerbo isn't the issue here. It is a symptom, but far from the whole disease. We have known for decades that most weight loss diets ultimately fail. Yes, they will fail if you have ED logic, which most people, or probably at least a large proportion of super morbidly obese people or people who are very big probably have some form of ED. At the very least, ED logic or ED behaviors. Researchers suspect that dieting that results in dramatic weight loss over a short period of time may slow down your metabolism for years post-diet. A cruel twist that for many of us essentially guarantees a lifetime as a fat person precisely because we've tried to escape that fate. This has to do with hypothyroidism. So it's not set in stone. It's just if you did a diet that is very hypo-inducing, like you cut out an entire food group, you cut your calories way too low, you overtrain, you do all this stuff, you can develop hypothyroidism because it again, if a diet is very extreme, it does become, it can be a part of an ED cycle. And that does make your metabolism worse. That did happen to me too. But you can take care of your thyroid health. You can stop doing diets that are too extreme. You can chill. You can go very slow. There's so many different things to do, and you can even take breaks. I know it's evil to say, but you can. I've done it multiple times, and I've been okay. Anyways, according to a study by the National ED Association, teens who diet are between 5 and 18 times more likely to develop EDs, like Anna and Bull, and that children and teens are particularly vulnerable to adverse outcomes from dieting. Children can and should access age-appropriate nutrition information, but focusing the education primarily around weight loss can harm more than it helps. It depends on what you're being taught, but at the same time, this, to me, it's like, is it chicken or the egg, right? So teens who are dieting, is it causing an ED or do they have an ED and it's causing overly restrictive dieting? I would say it's probably the other one. It was that way in my case. I had it already and dieting became a part of it. It was already there though. I already had the emotional eating, the eating because of anxiety. I already had the eating past the point of fullness before I ever even tried Weight Watchers, which is probably the first diet I tried. So people tend to, especially in BED, they go towards dieting because they see that they're gaining a massive amount of weight. And it starts to become scary. So always keep realism and always understand that you're gaining weight because you're eating a lot of calories. Okay? It's important. Okay. Let's continue. And programs like Curbo teach kids to restrict their eating through labeling some foods as red light and yellow light. No wonder the NIDA published a statement recently airing their concerns about the app. Despite what countless weight loss maxims and diet advertising touting success stories would have you believe, we simply don't know how to make fat people thin in the long term through diet and exercise alone. We don't know what the answer is, but we know it's not this. It's a caloric deficit in a way that's sustainable for you. It's healthy, not overly restrictive, not a nutrition-based diet. So a diet where you have a balanced amount of nutrients, and a diet where you're not hungry all the time. An acknowledgement of physical hunger and separating that from anxiety hunger is what we're going to call it, because that's what it is. I don't even want to say emotional hunger. It's anxiety hunger. It's anxiety. Okay? Don't ever eat because you're anxious. Because it's just a no. Okay. Anyways, last year, upon the news of Weight Watchers' rebrand to WW, I wasn't angry with the company. They were doing then what they are doing now. and what so much of the diet industry focuses on, creating profit and value for their shareholders. Above all, WW, like the diet industry at large, is charged with the same task as any for-profit business. Sorry, I butchered that sentence. Oh my gosh. Above all, WW, like the diet industry at large, is charged with the same task as any for-profit business, making money. On the day in February of 2018, when WW announced they'd be offering free memberships to teens for 6 weeks during that summer, their stock prices soared, increasing by 16% in just one day. In 2018, shares reportedly surged 490% over the previous year. Additionally, a company whose membership and earnings were previously on the decline looked like a promising investment. With their rebrand, WW did what it is designed to do, draw in new customers and new investors alike. I won't begrudge them for that. But the impacts of these companies don't begin and end at their corporate bottom line. The diet industry preys on insecurities to lock customers into a model that comes with no guarantees. After all, the diet industry still profits when their products fail us. Otherwise, the consumer base would evaporate. The industry would wither. It's true. I have to agree with her there. That's why I always say you can go it alone, in a sense. Like, you don't have to follow a diet plan or pay for it or anything. You don't have to. I haven't paid for anything. I wasn't angry last year, but today my emotions are a roiling sea. Sometimes I feel defeated, sometimes angry, sometimes crestfallen, sometimes motivated. The diet industry's success is predicated on our failure, and it is hard not to be stricken by the cynicism of such blatant hucksterism. But what hurts more is the painfully ubiquitous narrative that our bodies are to blame for our failures, even in children who are just learning multiplication. Diet advertisements and weight loss shows constantly invoke willpower and work ethic. Right. I don't agree with that. I think that they do matter, but it's not really an answer for obesity. It matters in a lot of other areas, though. It does. But when it comes to things like exercise, it should just be seen as a part of life. It's like you breathe, right? Then you also exercise. Your body is not supposed to be completely stagnant, okay? It's not, I don't think of going to the gym or exercising or moving as willpower. It's just living, okay? But like I said, as far as the diet side, there's some discipline involved, obviously, but it's like you have to look at the anxiety aspect if you have an ED. If you have BED, it's anxiety. Anyways, 75% of our health is, okay, let's see. Despite research from sources like the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention that about 75% of our health is determined by social determinants like where we live, what kinds of discrimination we experience, where we access healthcare, and our income level. Doesn't apply to obesity, Aubrey. No. If you're obese, you will struggle no matter what. Okay? Let's have some realism here, okay? You could be the richest person in the world. You're still going to struggle. Doesn't matter. Fatness does not discriminate. Anybody can be fat, and it's going to cause a health issue. Anyways. But instead of adopting their approach, the diet industry showcases stories of people whose whole lives seem to have fully transformed following weight loss. Instead, they fall back on the same tired and ineffective narratives that any incompleteness in fat people's lives owes to our size. Yeah, I don't agree with that. The fat bodies are a necessary failure, even as 70% of Americans have BMIs that are higher than recommended. That having a fat child is an inherent failure, a disease in desperate search of a cure, and that children as young as 8 years old need to learn the shame and failure of their bodies. No, it's just discipline and reasonableness within a diet, which I don't know if the program is that great for that, but that's what the goal is, Aubrey. It's not to teach a child failure and all this crap. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's just, hey, let's be reasonable about what we're eating, or let's think about what we're eating a little bit. Let's have a little strategy about what we're eating. Let's make sure we're filling in these nutritional gaps. You know, I don't agree with shaming a child, but for stuff like that, but just framing it in a more positive way. You can frame everything in a positive way. You can. Anyways. Okay. All right. To prime them for a lifetime living in a world that reviles their shape. Our children deserve better than shame. They deserve better than tactics we know only cause harm. They deserve better than the hurt so many of us have already shouldered. Our children deserve better than the shame the diet industry offers them. What our children deserve better is they deserve better than us projecting our problems onto them. That's what they deserve. Just calm down, Aubrey. It's okay. Gosh. All right, you guys. That was a trip. That took me down a whole other path than what I was thinking of. I think she was causing me to go a little nuts towards the end. You could see my hair was getting all crazy. She was driving me insane. Let me know what you guys think. I will talk to you guys again very soon. Have a good rest of your day, night, etc. Peace. Don't get this. I'll talk to you later. Bye.